Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all good. I am trying something brand new in this video, something I've never tried before. This is the silicone mold making putty from Just For You Online. It is skin safe, non-toxic and fast curing. It comes in a two-part system, part A, part B, and you get the same color coordinated spoons just to make sure you don't get it kind of mixed up. What I want a chunky, deep, open bezel. So I have molds like this. They're beautiful, but I really want an open-sided, open bezel. And I want a really deep one too. I also don't want it to have a hole for the loop. So there really was no mold that I had in my stash that would serve this purpose. Now, this is like a super thick, gloopy putty. I guess it is a mold making putty. It is skin safe, which is great, which means I can mold it in between my hands and get these two components together. But before I do that, now I need to prepare my surface. I'm going to be using UV resin and my double-sided UV light, which is why I want my mold to be completely open, bottom and top. Now, in order for me to get that, I obviously don't want to put resin straight onto the acrylic block provided with this UV light. So I'm going to place down some generic transfer tape. This is just generic transfer tape I would have bought off of Amazon a long time ago. This is the transfer tape that I honestly believe works best with silicone molds when you make your own molds. Then it was time to mix both parts of the putty together. The first one here is purple in colour, and this is definitely different consistency to the white one. Trying to fill the scoop, you know how you fill the scoop and you drag it against the side of the pot? It was definitely harder to do that with the purple than it was with the white. So I did decide to just use my hands and almost kind of level it out with my hands. That was the best way I could think of doing it at the time. Whereas the white one, it kind of stayed. When I scraped it against the side of the pot, it just stayed in place. I hope that is making sense. Then it was time to mix both part A and part B together. Now you want to do this until they are one colour. So at the moment we've got the purple and the white. We want to mix them together, smush them, squish them, pinch them, pull them. Mix them together until they are just one full whole colour. That is when you know they are mixed. Now, here's the thing with this putty. It's very similar to those fast curing products. You don't have long. You genuinely don't have long. I want to say you have around 1 minute to 2 minutes to get it mixed and get it in place before leaving it well alone to fully cure. This is how it looks when you first start kind of mixing it together, and at the further you go, you can see that those two colours are blending nicely, and it was around now that I figured I was ready to start moulding it. Now again, I'm looking for a round, open, fat, chunky, deep bezel. So I figured the easiest way to do that was to just roll it between my hands to create a snake. That was easier said than done because this putty is so squishy. It's so enjoyable to work with, almost therapeutic. So yeah, rolling a snake it wasn't as easy as you might think it was, because of course this putty is going off in all directions. But I knew that as soon as I got it down onto my transfer paper here that I'm using, I would be able to do the rest myself. So once I've laid it down, it's stuck immediately. There's no pulling it up at this point. Now it looks nothing like a circle at this point, but that's okay. I just pushed it down to make sure that it was fully adhered to that transfer tape surface before going in with my finger. Now right now I'm just using my nail to push out from the inside. I'm supporting it with my other hand so that I don't push it too far, and I just go round and around and around until I am happy that I have got something that looks like a circle. Now the next method is going to be so much easier. I decided to try a couple of different methods to see if I could get a neater circle, and oh my goodness me, oh wow. Grab your cookie cutters, guys. This was next level, beautiful, neat, exactly what I wanted. But I've never used this putty before, so I figured I would have a play and see what I could do. I have placed a cookie cutter down onto my transfer tape, and again, this is on the acrylic block that is going to slide in and out of my UV light. I'm going to work on the acrylic block just so it makes everything easier. I'm wondering if you're wondering what on earth I'm even going to be making. Well, here's the thing. When January came around, I decided I wanted to do some winter themed videos. Wintry, snowy, icy themed videos. Equally, I wanted to move on to animal themed videos. So I've decided I am gonna combine. From this day forward, this is the start of my Valentine's series. I'm going to be combining animals and Valentines. So to start with, this is where we are at. This is around 5 to 10 minutes later. The putty has fully cured. You can dig your nail in it and it leaves no marks. Now, if you wanted to, you could leave it on the transfer tape and start work. But I did make a bit of a mess inside where the putty kind of slid under the cookie cutter. So I'm going to peel it off. I peeled off that tape and look at this edge. This is beautiful. I could not have asked for a neater 90-degree edge. Now, hindsight is a wonderful thing. There are areas of these bezels that are lower than others. So if I were to do this again, I would definitely build those walls up to give me a much deeper edge. Now I've placed them back down onto some fresh transfer tape and it's time to start. Like I said, we're going winter themed. So I'm going to use white vinyl, mirror card, and penguins. How adorably cute are these? I spent some time before the new year even struck midnight. I was on my Cricut for a couple of days looking at images and of course Creative Fabrica. Creative Fabrica is also amazing. I do have a link for them down below. I am now working with Creative Fabrica, even though I've paid for my own annual subscription before they asked me. But anyway, it's all in the description box below. So here's the thing. This is what we're doing. We're doing a multi-layer, 3-dimensional piece with depth. We're doing a whole family of penguins living in the Arctic, in the snowy Arctic. And we are starting with layer 1. I do have my silicone putty, my DIY silicone putty, huge chunky open bezels laying on some transfer tape, but I did trim around the edges so you won't see it coming out from around the edges, and that was purely because it was just getting in the way. It was sticking to my gloves, everything was a little bit sticky, so I did trim around the edges, and at this point I'm just pouring the first layer. I hit it with my lighter and then I'm placing it into my UV lamp. This is the double-sided UV lamp from Resin. And this is the reason I wanted open bezels to be able to cure from underneath as well as from above. Now the next step is really optional if you do decide to do anything like this. I wanted to create some kind of northern lights, aurora borealis in the night sky. Now again, this is going to be a 3-dimensional multiple layer winter scene, so I figured I would try, if I could, to get in some of that northern lights in the sky. And I'm just using the glow in the dark powder by Resin in with some UV resin and using my cocktail stick to just move it around in there. No idea if this was going to work or if it would have any impact whatsoever on the final piece, but I decided I'm going to try it. Now, it really was at this stage I decided to focus on one of the open bezels for the purposes of the video. I just felt like working on 2 at a time was a little bit messy, and I just prefer the look of one thing in the center of the screen. So from here on in, I did not work on the other one. I'm simply going to work on this one. First thing I did was cut out some white vinyl. Now, it is at this point, it doesn't really matter if I've got 2 layers of UV, but I still think it's going to help having the UV cured from underneath. So my white vinyl has gone down from my very first snowy ground. Next up, we've put in some of the mirror card. Now this is really just to give that illusion of ice, that kind of icy ridge that my little itty bitty penguin is going to be standing on. I honestly love these little penguins, and like I said, I really wanted to start doing some winter themed videos, but even since filming this one, that has evolved into more of a generic kind of animal themed series, so it is all good. Next up, we have our first little penguin in, and we're going in with another layer of UV resin. I have to say, this is the kind of project that as it evolved, it just became easier and easier. I found easier methods to do things. I found easier ways to pour the UV resin in, and everything just got easier. Now, you would have seen my left hand did not have a glove there, and that is just because at this point, I'm not touching the UV resin with my left hand. Okay. Next layer of snow going in. We are already creating depth here because we have since poured a clear layer of resin. So this layer of white vinyl is going on the surface of the next layer of resin. So already we have shadow, already we have depth. But the next step is to put in that little slither of the icy kind of crust, that reflective, gorgeous, icy snow that we see, that obviously is not a mirror, but this is to give the illusion of it. So again, very, very optional where you put your pieces. I'm just laying it down very close to the top of that last layer of vinyl and pressing it firmly into place. Now, this mirror card does come with a protective clear sleeve over the top with print on it. So do make sure that you do remove that protective sleeve as well, so we don't have letters and it does become a true mirror. Then it was time for the next penguin. Honestly, I feel like maybe this is quite a repetitive video, the one that I shouldn't have to necessarily talk through. I was toying with the idea of just putting music on and letting you guys just chill and watch. This is where I started to get fancy schmancy. I decided to spin the bezel with my finger, and it made everything so much quicker, so much easier, and I wasn't blocking so much of the camera view by leaning over and using my UV in there. I repeated the process, guys. One layer of UV resin, one penguin, one mirror, one snow level, and I repeated it. Another layer of UV resin, another layer of vinyl, another layer of that mirror card, giving us the illusion of pure ice, and another layer of UV resin. And I continued this until it basically filled all the way to the top. After my fourth layer of resin, I decided I wanted to add a little bit of something something, so I started to mix in some of that super sparkle white in with some UV resin just to create that glisten, that very, very stereotypical snowy glisten that sparkles in the light. I'm not adding too much. I don't want to completely cover up what I've done so far. I definitely do not want to cover up those mirrors, that reflective snow there as well. So I'm just adding a tiny bit and back under the UV lamp before I do the next layer of UV resin. I hope you can see this coming together already. I absolutely love the way it was already 3D and I could already see so much depth. I simply carried on adding my snowy layers using the white vinyl. Again, the white vinyl was really roughly hand cut. I didn't do that in the Cricut. I simply used scissors and just cut out pieces of it, making sure that I kind of covered up the gaps like I am here. I'm using more of that UV resin with the super sparkle white in on top of this layer, straight under the UV light. This was multiple layers, and I think in the end there was around 7 layers of UV resin that we used, or at least it had to go in under the UV light around 7 times. It was just so much fun building it up and seeing those layers come to life with every penguin that I laid in. It was like a whole other dimension. Now we do work in odd numbers here, so this is penguin number 5 and the final little guy that is going in here. Of course, if you wanted to get real fancy, you could do these penguins in all different sizes so that it would be a little bit more depth reel, so they would be bigger at the front, getting smaller as they went through the back. But I got to the point where my actual DIY silicone putty massive open bezel was getting low. It was getting low in one section, which is where obviously if I did this again, I would make sure that I built those walls right up. So this is the last final layer of UV resin going in, because if I do any more, it is going to pour out over the edge. Luckily, I have put my 5 penguins in. I only wanted 5. They're all in there, and this is how we are looking. It is absolutely gorgeous. It was time to take it apart, and I realized when I took it apart, I did still have some sticky edges around that UV wall, around the wall that was touching the putty. So I did put it back under the UV light for the full 5 minutes that this UV light goes up to, and it worked a dream. At this point, it is time to do the back. We're not going to leave the back clear. We want to give the back a real dark night sky. But I figured before I do that, it has to have some stars. So I am using some silver chunky glitter in some UV resin. Not too much, just a slither, a hint, a little bit of a hint of the stars. Now, I do believe when you see the Northern Lights, you don't see stars, but don't quote me on that because I've never seen the Northern Lights. Once that was fully cured, it is time to give it a complete back coat. Now, you can back coat this with epoxy resin or black UV resin. I decided to use some of my black gel nail polish. It's going to work absolutely perfectly, and it's about as easy as it gets. You don't need gloves because it's nail polish, and you can literally just brush it on with the brush already provided. I honestly think I need to work a lot more with nail varnishes. This was 2 coats of nail varnish and 1 final coat of UV resin, and this is what we are looking like. Now the front is messy, the edges are a tad bit sharp, so I did end up doing yet another final UV coat on this piece after just sanding it lightly all the way around using a super high grit. I wiped it off and then gave it the final coat of UV resin, and this is when I absolutely love seeing things come back to life. When you've sanded and you pour that resin over the top and everything underneath just pops out at you. I'm loving this one. Now, I didn't want any spillages at this point because I thought I've come a long way and I've put a lot of work into this tiny but fat and chunky open bezel with a beautiful wintry wonderland scene with all of these penguins. I'm hoping that the camera is picking up the depth and the shadows created and casted by all of these penguins being laid on top of each other. I'll be honest, at this point, my camera was struggling. My camera was really struggling because everything was so shiny and reflective. My camera was just really blurry. So I'm hoping that you can see the vision. I hope you love it as much as I do. It was so much fun. So much fun, and you're in one spot and it's just therapeutic to just keep going. This is what it looks like in the dark with those northern lights, and honestly there is a little bit of light coming in the window because when it was pitch black you couldn't see a single thing. But I love the fact that I still put the northern lights in there. Let me know what you think, and I hope you've never seen anything like this before, using the mould putty, creating layers and depth and a 3D image, multiple layers of this penguin family. I've loved it. I hope you have too, and all of the details you need will be down below in the description box. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.